The stars looked peaceful through the view screen, but Captain John Carter knew better. He stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance, his hands clasped behind his back. The crew around him worked quietly at their stations. They had been waiting for this day for 3 years. "Captain, we have something," Lieutenant Amy Watson said from her tactical station. Her voice was calm, but John could hear the tension underneath. "Unknown vessel dropping out of hyperspace, right where Intel said it would be." John nodded slowly. "All stations, this is it. Remember your training. We've prepared for this moment." The alien ship appeared on their main screen. It was beautiful, in a strange way, all smooth curves and shimmering metal that seemed to change color as it moved. The Zephyrin Confederacy had finally arrived at Earth's doorstep. On the alien vessel, Commander Zelnath stretched his 3 arms and blinked his 3 eyes. This was supposed to be a routine scouting mission. The star charts showed this system had a young civilization, barely capable of radio signals. Easy prey for the Confederacy's expansion. "Commander," his second officer clicked in their language, "we're detecting artificial structures near the 4th planet." Zelnath turned his elongated head. "Show me." The scan appeared on their viewer. There was a ship near the blue and green planet. It looked primitive, all angles and rough metal. Nothing like the elegant vessels of the Confederacy. Zelnath almost laughed. These creatures had barely learned to leave their planet's surface. "Send the standard message," he ordered. "Tell them to prepare for integration into the Confederacy." Baxir, on the USS Defiance, Ensign Kyle Murphy looked up from his communication console. "Sir, they're sending a transmission. It's in multiple languages, including English." "Put it through," John ordered. The message was exactly what they had expected. The aliens spoke of surrender, of joining their empire as servants, of providing resources and workers. John had read this exact message before, pulled from the memory banks of a crashed alien probe on Mars 50 years ago. "Should I respond, Captain?" Kyle asked. "Not yet. Let them think we're scared." "Amy, are our friends ready?" Amy smiled. 300 ships holding position behind the moon, sir. They're all waiting for your signal." The bridge crew exchanged glances. They all knew what those aliens didn't. Humanity had found that crashed probe in 2075. Inside it was a treasure of information, star maps, technology blueprints, and most importantly, the Confederacy's entire expansion plan. Earth had been marked for conquest in the year 2125. Humanity had done something no other young species had ever done. They had prepared. For 50 years, Earth had united like never before. Old enemies became allies. Resources that once went to fighting each other went to building ships. Every nation contributed. Every person knew what was coming, and they had kept it secret from the galaxy, pretending to be the primitive civilization the aliens expected. Commander Zelnath waited for a response from the primitive vessel. Usually, young species panicked at this point. They would beg, or try to fight with their weak weapons or attempt to flee. This ship just sat there. "Commander," his sensor officer said, "I'm reading strange energy signatures from their moon." "What kind of signatures?" I'm not sure. It's almost like they're hiding something behind it." Zelnath's middle eye twitched. That was impossible. These creatures had only reached their moon a century ago. They couldn't have built anything significant there. John Carter took a deep breath. "Kyle, open a channel to the alien vessel." The young ensign nodded and worked his controls. "Channel open, sir." "Zephyrin vessel, this is Captain John Carter of the United Earth Defense Force. We receive your message. However, we have a counter-proposal on knee." The alien bridge, Zelnath's translator struggled with the response. Counter-proposal? That word didn't exist in their first contact protocols. Young species didn't make counter-proposals. "Before you answer," John continued, "you should know something. Amy, drop the cloak." Behind Earth's moon, space itself seemed to shimmer and twist. Where there had been empty void, 300 human warships suddenly appeared. They weren't pretty like the Zephyrin vessel. They were built for one purpose: war. Each ship bristled with weapons, their dark hulls absorbing light rather than reflecting it. Selnath's 3 hearts stopped beating for a moment. His officers around him made sounds of shock and fear. The primitive species had a fleet, not just a few ships but hundreds, and they had cloaking technology. That was supposed to be impossible for a species at their development level. How? Selnath whispered. His tactical officer was running scans frantically. Commander, their weapons, they're based on our technology but modified. The power readings are impossible. Each ship could destroy a Confederate cruiser. That's not possible. They've only had spaceflight for less than 2 centuries. John watched the alien ship on his screen. He could imagine their confusion. Every other young species the Confederacy had conquered had been caught by surprise. They had arrived to find primitive worlds with maybe a few satellites and space stations. Not this. Zephyrin, Commander, John said, his voice carrying across the void. 50 years ago, one of your probes crashed on our Mars colony. We found it, we studied it. We learned about your Confederacy and your plans for our world. He paused to let that sink in. We've spent 5 decades preparing for this moment. Every ship you see was built to fight yours. Every weapon was designed to pierce your shields. Every defense was created to stop your attacks. We know your tactics, your technology, and your weaknesses. On Earth, Admiral Lisa Park watched the encounter from her command center buried deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. Hundreds of screens showed different views of the confrontation. Her staff worked quietly around her, monitoring communications from across the solar system. Admiral, her aide reported, all defense platforms report ready. Mars garrison is on standby. The asteroid mining stations have powered up their hidden weapons. Lisa nodded. This was just the beginning. The 300 ships near the moon were only what they were showing. Earth had more surprises waiting. Selnath's mind raced. This changed everything. No species had ever been ready for them before. The Confederacy's strength came from catching civilizations before they could defend themselves. But these humans had somehow turned the table. Commander, his communication officer said, should we call for reinforcements? Selnath considered. The nearest Confederate fleet was months away. And if these humans had been preparing for 50 years, who knew what else they had hidden? Weapons locked on the alien vessel. Amy reported on the Defiance. All ships report ready, Captain. John raised his hand. Hold fire. We're not here to start a war. We're here to prevent one. He looked at the alien ship on the screen. It hadn't moved, hadn't raised shields, hadn't powered weapons. They were in shock. Good. That was exactly what humanity had planned. Zephyrin, Commander, John said. We don't want to fight. But we will if forced. You came here expecting to find easy prey. Instead, you found a species that refuses to be conquered. We propose a different path. The bridge of the Defiance was silent except for the hum of equipment. Everyone waited to see what the aliens would do. This was the moment 50 years of preparation had led to. Earth had revealed its hand. Now they would see if their gamble would pay off. In the void between the 2 fleets, history hung in the balance. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity would not go quietly into subjugation. They had taken the Confederacy's own technology and turned it into a shield for their world. The hunters had found something they had never encountered before. Prey that had become predators. The stars continued to shine peacefully, but everything had changed. The galaxy would soon shake with the news of what happened here. A young species had done the impossible. They had been ready. Admiral Lisa Park stood in the center of Fortress Luna's command center, watching dozens of screens that showed every corner of the solar system. The massive underground facility buried deep beneath the moon's surface hummed with activity. Officers and technicians worked at their stations, coordinating humanity's greatest revelation. Admiral, the Zephyrin ship is transmitting again, her communications officer reported. Put it on the main screen, Lisa ordered. The alien commander appeared, his 3 eyes blinking rapidly in what their xenobiologists had identified as a sign of extreme stress. His blue-gray skin had turned a lighter shade, Another stress indicator according to the crashed probe's biological database. Human captain, Zelnath said, his translated voice carrying disbelief. You claim to have our technology. This is impossible. The Confederacy's technology is protected by quantum encryption. Lisa smiled slightly. The alien still didn't understand. She pressed a button on her command console. Captain Carter, I'm taking over the communication. On the screen, Zelnath saw the human command structure shift. A female human appeared on a secondary display, obviously in charge of a much larger operation than just one ship. Commander Zelnath of the Zephyrin Confederacy, Lisa began. I am Admiral Lisa Park of the United Earth Defense Force. Your quantum encryption was excellent. It took our best minds 3 years to crack it. But crack it we did. She gestured to her staff. Execute Protocol 7. Show them everything. Across the solar system, humanity dropped its mask. Cloaking fields that had been active for decades suddenly shut down. What the Zephyrins had thought was an empty, primitive system revealed itself to be a fortress. The asteroid belt, which appeared to be nothing but floating rocks, suddenly lit up with thousands of installations. Mining stations that were actually weapon platforms. Processing facilities that were really shipyards. What looked like debris was actually a network of defensive satellites, all armed with adapted Zephyrin technology. Mars revealed its true face. Next. The Red Planet, which Confederate scouts had dismissed as a struggling colony world, showed hundreds of military bases. The supposed research stations were actually fighter bases. The terraforming equipment was really shield generators capable of protecting the entire planet. Jupiter's moons unveiled massive construction yards. Io, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto each hosted facilities that could build a dozen warships simultaneously. Saturn's rings hid even more surprises. Stealth stations, early warning sensors, and weapons platforms disguised as ice chunks. But Earth itself was the biggest surprise. The blue and green world that looked so peaceful from space revealed orbital defense platforms that had been cloaked for 20 years. Hundreds of them, each carrying weapons that humanity had improved upon from the original Zephyrin designs. On the Zephyrin ship, panic was spreading. Zelnath's officers were all talking at once, their clicking language filling the bridge with chaos. Silence, Zelnath commanded. He turned to his tactical officer. How many military installations are we detecting? The officer's 3 hands shook as he worked his console. Commander, I'm counting over 5,000 defensive structures. Their fleet isn't just 300 ships. I'm detecting construction bays with at least 2,000 more vessels in various stages of completion. Zelnath felt his legs weaken. No conquered species had ever achieved this level of military development. The Confederacy had subjugated 17 different civilizations, and none had been able to mount more than token resistance. Back on the USS Defiance, Captain John Carter watched his tactical display update with all of humanity's revealed assets. He felt pride swell in his chest. His grandfather had been one of the engineers who had helped decode that crashed probe. 3 generations of his family had worked toward this moment. Captain, Lieutenant Amy Watson said, we're receiving priority traffic from Earth Command. President Foster wants to address the Zephyrin commander directly. John nodded. Route it through. President Ellen Foster appeared on the main screen. She was in the Situation Room beneath the White House, surrounded by the leaders of Earth's united government. Unlike the military officers, she wore civilian clothes, but her bearing was just as commanding. Commander Zelnath, she began, her voice calm but firm. I am the elected leader of United Earth. We have prepared this reception for your arrival not out of hostility, but out of necessity. Your probe's database was quite thorough, we know. What happens to species that aren't prepared for your arrival? She paused, letting her words sink in. The Kelvin were pacified in 3 days. The Morteki managed to resist for 6 months before surrendering. The Draknari didn't even have spaceflight when you arrived. Each species was caught unprepared, their technology centuries behind yours. We decided we would be different. In the command center beneath Cheyenne Mountain, General Sam Mitchell watched the exchange while reviewing tactical data with his staff. The massive holographic display showed not just the solar system, but projections extending into Zephyrin space. General, His intelligence officer reported, "Our stealth reconnaissance drones are in position throughout Confederate space. We can track every major fleet movement." Sam nodded. Those drones had been launched 5 years ago using the hyperspace technology derived from the probe. They were humanity's insurance policy, making sure the Confederacy couldn't mass a surprise attack. "Sir, should we reveal the Nova bombs?" his weapons officer asked. "Not yet. Let them digest what they're seeing first." Back on the Zephyrin ship, Zelnath was receiving frantic messages from his government. The High Council was demanding answers. How had a primitive species achieved this level of development? Why hadn't their intelligence network detected it? The answer was simple but hard to accept. The humans had played the part of a primitive civilization perfectly. Their public broadcasts, which the Confederacy monitored, showed a world barely managing global unity. Their visible space program appeared to be struggling to maintain a few dozen satellites. Everything the Confederacy could observe suggested Earth was exactly what it should be, weak and unprepared. But it had all been theater, every broadcast carefully crafted, every visible satellite a decoy. The real human civilization had been building its strength in secret, underground and in cloaked facilities throughout the system. Lieutenant Commander Paul Rodriguez coordinated the fleet movements from the USS Retribution. His ship was one of the new Devastator-class vessels, built entirely with knowledge gained from the probe. As he watched, the 300 ships of the home fleet moved into a perfect defensive sphere around the Zephyrin vessel. "All ships, maintain position," he ordered through the fleet command network. "Weapons powered but not locked. We're sending a message, not starting a fight." The formation was deliberate. Every military student in the Confederacy would recognize it. It was their own defensive pattern alpha, but executed with a precision that even Confederate fleets rarely achieved. The humans weren't just using their technology. They had mastered their tactics too. On Earth, in a secure bunker beneath Beijing, General Chen Wei met with his counterparts from Russia, India, Europe, and the Americas. They watched the encounter through quantum-encrypted feeds. 50 years of sacrifice, Chen said quietly. 3 generations working toward this moment. "My father died never seeing this day," the Russian commander replied. "He spent his whole life designing weapons we hoped we'd never have to use." They all understood the weight of this moment. Earth had given up so much for this preparation. Resources that could have gone to improving life had gone to defense. Brilliant minds that could have pursued pure science had instead worked on weapons. All for this moment when the predators finally arrived. Admiral Lisa Park made a decision. "Commander Zelnath, there's something else you should know. Computer, display Nova bomb specifications." The technical readout appeared on the Zephyrin screens. At first, Zelnath didn't understand what he was looking at. Then his science officer gasped. "Commander, these are our Cascade weapons, but the yield has been increased by a factor of 10. These could destroy entire fleets with a single detonation." "How many do they have?" Zelnath asked, dreading the answer. "According to this display, each of their Devastator-class ships carries 5. They have 60 such ships. That's 300 planet-killer weapons, Commander." The bridge fell silent. 300 weapons that could each destroy a Confederate battle group. It was enough firepower to cripple the entire Confederacy in a single coordinated strike. "President," Foster spoke again. "We share this information not as a threat but as a demonstration of trust. We could have struck first. Your probe's database gave us the location of every major Confederate world and fleet base. We chose not to. We chose to wait and talk instead." Zelnath's mind reeled. These humans had the capability to launch a preemptive strike that would have devastated the Confederacy. Instead, they had waited for this meeting. They had chosen revelation over attack. The implications were staggering. Everything the Confederacy believed about younger species was wrong. They weren't all weak. They weren't all unprepared. Given warning and time, they could become powerful enough to challenge even the mighty Zephyrin Confederacy. The galaxy was about to change, and it had started here in this system that was supposed to be an easy conquest. Deep beneath Cheyenne Mountain, General Sam Mitchell stood before a massive holographic display that showed the entire Milky Way galaxy. Points of light marked Confederate systems in red, while Earth glowed blue at the edge of what the aliens called primitive space. His staff of 200 officers worked quietly at their stations, monitoring the situation above while preparing for what might come next. "Madam President," Sam said to the secure connection with the White House, "the Zephyrin commander has been silent for 10 minutes. Their ship is running deep scans of our system, trying to verify what we're showing them." President Ellen Foster nodded from her screen. "Let them look. The more they see, the more they'll understand we're serious." She turned to her cabinet members, seated around the Situation Room table. The Secretary of Defense, Frank Lewis, was reviewing casualty projections if things went wrong. The Secretary of State, Maria Santos, was preparing diplomatic protocols no human had ever needed before. How to negotiate with a galactic empire as equals. "General Mitchell," the President continued, "I want you to explain our doctrine to them. Make sure they understand we're not seeking war." Sam nodded and opened a channel to both the Zephyrin ship and Admiral Park's Lunar Command Center. "Commander Zelnath, this is General Sam Mitchell, Supreme Commander of Earth Defense Forces. I want to explain humanity's military doctrine so there are no misunderstandings." On the Zephyrin vessel, Zelnath listened while his officers continued their scans. Every reading they took made the situation worse. The humans hadn't just copied Confederate technology. They had improved it. Their shields operated on frequencies that would be difficult to penetrate. Their weapons had been modified to exploit known weaknesses in Confederate armor. "Speak, human general," Zelnath replied, his voice translator conveying his exhaustion. Sam activated a holographic display that would be visible to the aliens. It showed the solar system, then expanded to show nearby space. "Our doctrine is simple," Sam began. "We call it deterrence through preparation. We don't want to conquer anyone. We don't want to destroy anyone. We simply want to make the cost of attacking us so high that peace becomes the only logical option." The display showed simulation after simulation. Confederate fleets attacking Earth and being destroyed by hidden defenses. Human Nova bombs detonating in Confederate shipyards. Both sides losing thousands of ships and millions of lives. "These simulations use your own tactical programs from the probe," Sam explained. "We've run 30,000 scenarios. In every one where you attack us, both sides suffer catastrophic losses. Yes, the Confederacy might eventually win through sheer numbers, but at what cost? Half your fleet, 3/4. In her Lunar Command Center, Admiral Lisa Park added her own information to the briefing. "We've also prepared for the long war scenario. Our industrial capacity can produce 50 warships per month. We have trained reserves of 20 million personnel. Every human over the age of 16 has basic military training." She paused to let that sink in. "We turned our entire species into a military force, Commander. Not because we want war, but because we refuse to be slaves." Captain Beth Coleman sat aboard the USS Constitution, one of the ships holding position around the Zephyrin vessel. She had been chosen as humanity's diplomatic liaison because of her unique background. She had spent 10 years studying the Confederate language and culture from the probe's database. She understood them better than perhaps any other human. "Commander Zelnath," she transmitted, "I request permission to come aboard your vessel. I believe face-to-face discussion would be beneficial." There was a long pause. Allowing an alien aboard a Confederate ship was almost unheard of, especially an alien from a species that wasn't yet conquered. But nothing about this situation was normal. "Permission granted," Zelnath finally replied. "You may bring 2 escorts." Beth chose carefully. She brought Colonel Jake Harrison, a Marine who had spent his career training for combat against Zephyrins, and Dr. Lisa Chang, Earth's foremost expert on Zephyrin biology. They took a shuttle across the void between the fleets. The Zephyrin ship's docking bay was a study in elegant design. The walls seemed to flow like liquid metal, and the air had a slight purple tint that the probe's data had warned them about. Beth and her team wore breathing filters but otherwise showed no weapons or armor. This was about trust. Zelnath met them personally, towering over the humans at 9 feet tall. His 3 arms moved independently, a gesture their cultural database identified as uncertainty. His 3 eyes focused on each human separately, a disorienting effect Beth had trained for but still found unsettling. "You are small?" Zelnath said simply. Yes, Beth replied in perfect Zephyrin, causing the commander to take a step back in surprise. But as your scans have shown, size isn't everything. They were led to a conference chamber where several Confederate officers waited. The room was configured for Zephyrin physiology, but the humans remained standing comfortably. Beth activated a small holographic projector she had brought. Commander, I want to show you something from your own history. She said the projection showed a Confederate fleet from 200 years ago, attacking the Kelvin homeworld. The Kelvin ships were few and primitive. The battle lasted less than an hour. Then it showed the Morteki resistance, lasting months but ultimately futile. Then the Draknari, who didn't even have spacecraft to fight back. Every species you've conquered followed the same pattern, Beth explained. They were surprised, unprepared, and fell quickly. This created a doctrine in your military. Young species are always weak. But what if one wasn't surprised? What if one had 50 years to prepare? She changed the display to show Earth's history. We found your probe in 2075. By 2076, every major government on Earth knew what was coming. By 2080, we had a unified, planetary government for the first time in our history. By 2090, we had reverse-engineered your basic technology. By 2100, we had improved on it. The Confederate officers were clicking among themselves in agitation. Everything about their expansion doctrine assumed technological and tactical superiority. The humans had eliminated both advantages. Back on Earth, crowds had gathered in every major city. The government had finally revealed the truth to the general population. The aliens had arrived and humanity was ready. In New York's Times Square, thousands watched giant screens showing the standoff in space. In London, Moscow, Tokyo, and 100 other cities, people stood silent, waiting to see if 50 years of preparation would save them or doom them. 16-year-old Danny Park, the admiral's son, stood with his classmates in their school gymnasium in Denver. They had all grown up knowing this day would come. Their entire education had been shaped by it. They learned mathematics through trajectory calculations. They learned history through the lens of failed alien conquests. They learned biology by studying Zephyrin physiology. We're really doing it, his friend whispered. We're standing up to them. Danny nodded, his eyes on the screen. His mother was up there, commanding humanity's greatest gamble. In the Zephyrin conference room, Commander Zelnath was receiving messages from the High Council. They were demanding he either conquer or retreat. But both options seemed impossible now. Conquering would cost more than the Confederacy could afford. Retreating would show weakness to every other species in the galaxy. You've put us in an impossible position, Zelnath said to Beth. No, she replied firmly. We've offered you a new position. Instead of conqueror and conquered, we could be neighbors, trading partners, perhaps even allies eventually. The Confederacy doesn't have allies among younger species. One of Zelnath's officers interjected. Colonel Harrison spoke for the first time. Then maybe it's time to start, because I can guarantee you'll face more species like us. We're going to share our defensive preparations with every young civilization we can find. The age of easy conquest is over. The threat was clear but delivered calmly. Humanity wouldn't just defend itself, it would teach others to do the same. The Confederate expansion would face prepared defenders everywhere. President Foster had authorized Beth to make an offer, and now she did. We propose a treaty. Humanity remains independent and sovereign. Our space is our own. In exchange, we won't share your military weaknesses with other species. We won't launch preemptive strikes on your worlds. We'll even consider limited trade agreements. And if we refuse? Zelnath asked. Beth's expression hardened. Then we implement the Samson Protocol. Every human ship is equipped with deadman switches. If you destroy us, automated systems will launch every Nova bomb we have at your core worlds. We might die, but we'll take half the Confederacy with us. The room fell silent. The humans had thought of everything. They had prepared for victory, for defeat, and even for mutual annihilation. They had turned themselves into a species that couldn't be conquered without unacceptable losses. Dr. Chang added one more piece of information. We've also developed biological weapons based on your genetic structure from the probe. We haven't built them, and we won't if we reach an agreement. But if forced..." She let the threat hang in the air. Xilnath's 3 eyes closed in sequence, a sign of deep thought. "I need to consult with the High Council." "Take your time," Beth said, standing to leave. "We've waited 50 years, we can wait a little longer." The news of humanity's stand spread through Confederate space like a shockwave. On the Zephyrin homeworld, the High Council convened in the Great Chamber, a crystalline structure that had stood for 3,000 years. High Chancellor Veltor sat at the center, his ancient eyes reviewing the data streams from the human system with growing disbelief. 50 years of preparation, he said to the assembled council members. "They found our probe, and instead of panic, they prepared. This is unprecedented." The Minister of Expansion, Corval, clicked his disagreement. "They are still just one species. We could overwhelm them with our full might." "At what cost?" asked General Mordaunt, the Supreme Military Commander. "I've run the tactical simulations using their revealed capabilities. We would need to commit 60% of our entire fleet to guarantee victory. The losses would be between 40 and 70% of those forces." The council chamber erupted in shocked clicks and whistles. Such losses hadn't been contemplated since the Unification Wars a millennium ago. "There's more," the intelligence minister added. "Reports are coming in from across our territory. Strange incidents that we now believe are connected to the humans." A holographic display showed Confederate space. Points began lighting up across dozens of systems. A shipyard above Kepler 442b had detected a ghost signal that disappeared immediately. A military station near the more techy homeworld had briefly spotted an unidentified ship that vanished before they could investigate. Defense platforms throughout Confederate space had reported similar anomalies over the past year. "They've been scouting us," General Mordaunt said quietly. "These humans have stealth ships throughout our space. They know where our fleets are stationed, where our shipyards operate, where our defenses are weakest." On the stealth ship USS Shadow, Captain Dan Phillips watched the Confederate Council through a quantum-encrypted feed. His ship had been hiding in Zephyrin space for 8 months, one of 12 such vessels mapping the enemy's strength. "Send this feed to Admiral Park," he ordered his communications officer. "The Council is more worried than we expected." His ship was a marvel of human engineering, combining stolen Confederate technology with human innovation. It could hide from every sensor the aliens possessed, slip through their defensive networks, and gather intelligence from the heart of their empire. "Captain," his tactical officer reported, "we're detecting movement from the Third Fleet. They're mobilizing." Dan nodded. "Track them, but maintain position. We need to know if they're heading for Earth." Back in the Sol system, the standoff continued. Commander Xilnath had been in communication with the High Council for 12 hours. His crew was exhausted from the stress, but the humans seemed perfectly patient. Admiral Lisa Park used the time to coordinate with Earth's allies. Yes, allies. In the past 5 years, humanity had secretly contacted 3 other young species who were on the Confederate expansion list. The Altarians, the Vegans, and the Centauri had all received packages of defensive technology and warnings about what was coming. "Admiral," her intelligence officer reported, "we're receiving a coded transmission from the Altarians. They're asking if it's time." Lisa smiled. "Tell them to maintain readiness but take no action. Let's see how this plays out first." The Altarians had been scheduled for conquest in 10 years. Now they had shields, weapons, and most importantly, knowledge. They knew Confederate tactics and had begun their own preparations. If humanity succeeded here, they would be ready when their time came. In the subject worlds of the Confederacy, oppressed populations watched with growing hope. On the Kelvin homeworld, resistance fighters gathered in hidden bunkers to monitor the human situation. "They're doing it," the Kelvin resistance leader said to his followers. "They're actually standing up to the Confederacy. For 200 years, the Kelvin had been slaves, their technology suppressed, their children taken for Confederate labor forces. But now they saw something they had never imagined. A young species making the Confederacy hesitate. The Morteki were even more interested. They had fought the Confederacy for 6 months before surrendering, the longest resistance of any conquered species. Now, in their underground cities, Morteki engineers studied the sensor data being leaked from the human standoff. Their shield, modulation, one engineer said excitedly. It's brilliant. It cycles through frequencies faster than Confederate weapons can adapt. And these Nova bombs, another added. We could build these. The Confederacy never thought to check if we retained this knowledge. Across 17 conquered worlds, the same realization was spreading. The humans had shown that the Confederacy could be challenged. More importantly, they had shown how it could be done. President Ellen Foster addressed the United Nations General Assembly, though it was now the United Earth Government Parliament. Representatives from every nation watched as she explained the Igai Ki situation. My fellow humans, she began, we stand at the crossroads of history. For 50 years we have prepared for this moment. Every sacrifice, every resource devoted to defense, every brilliant mind turned to weapons development has led us here. She paused, looking at the faces of leaders who had supported this massive undertaking. The Zephyrin Confederacy expected to find prey. Instead, they found predators who choose not to hunt. We have shown them our strength not to conquer but to remain free. Now we wait to see if they will accept a new paradigm, coexistence instead of domination. In his private chamber on the Confederate ship, Selnath reviewed message after message from the High Council. The debate was fierce. Some wanted immediate attack regardless of cost. Others wanted to retreat and pretend this never happened. A growing faction wanted something unprecedented, negotiation. His tactical officer entered with new information. Commander, we're detecting energy signatures from 3 other systems. They match human technology. Zelnath's eyes widened. Where? The, Altair system, Vega system, and Proxima Centauri. All showed defensive preparations similar to Earth's. The implications hit him immediately. The humans had been sharing their technology with other young species. The next conquests on the Confederate schedule were already preparing. The easy expansion that had fueled the Confederacy for 1,000 years was ending. Captain John Carter stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance, watching the Zephyrin ship. His crew had been at battle stations for 36 hours, but they showed no signs of fatigue. This was what they had trained their entire lives for. Captain, Amy Watson said, I'm picking up hyperspace signatures. Multiple contacts incoming. John's jaw tightened. How many? 12 vessels. Confederate configuration. They'll arrive in approximately 2 hours. Alert the fleet. Prepare for possible engagement. The 300 human ships adjusted their positions slightly, weapons charging to full power. If the Confederacy wanted a fight, humanity was ready to give them one. But on the Confederate homeworld, High Chancellor Veltor made a different decision. Send the diplomatic fleet, not the war fleet, he ordered General Morden. Chancellor? The general questioned. These humans have given us an opportunity disguised as a crisis, Veltor explained. For 1,000 years we've expanded through conquest. It's been profitable but also costly. Wars, occupation forces, resistance movements all drain resources. What if there's another way? He brought up economic projections. Trade with a technologically advanced, independent Earth could be more profitable than conquering a destroyed Earth. They've already improved on our technology. What else might they develop if they remain free? The Minister of Science agreed. Their innovations in just 50 years are remarkable. As subjects, their creativity would be suppressed. As partners, the word hung in the air. Partners. The Confederacy had never had partners among younger species. Back on Earth, 10-year-old Sarah Kim sat with her grandmother in Seoul, watching the news feeds. Her grandmother had been one of the original engineers to work on the probe back in 2075. Grandma, are we going to win? Sarah asked. Her grandmother pulled her close. We already have, little one. Win or lose the standoff, we've shown the galaxy that humanity won't kneel. That's a victory that can never be taken away. Around the world, similar conversations were happening. Children who had grown up knowing aliens were coming finally saw their parents' and grandparents' work bearing fruit. The fear that had driven humanity for 50 years was transforming into pride. In space, the 12 Confederate ships dropped out of hyperspace. But instead of warships, they were diplomatic vessels, unarmed and carrying the Confederate seal of negotiation. High Chancellor Veltor himself appeared on the communication channel. Humans of Earth, I am the leader of the Zephyrin Confederacy. I come with an unprecedented proposal. Admiral Park and President Foster appeared on split screens to respond. We're listening, High Chancellor, the President said. For the first time in our history, the Confederacy offers recognition of sovereignty to a young species. You will remain independent. Your space will be respected. In return, we ask for 3 things. Everyone waited. First, that you cease sharing military technology with other species. Second, that you engage in limited trade agreements with the Confederacy. Third, that you share your innovations in shield and weapon technology with us. The human leadership exchanged glances. It was more than they had. 6 months had passed since the first contact between humanity and the Zephyrin Confederacy. The Treaty of Sol, as it came to be known, was signed aboard the human battle station orbiting Neptune. The ceremony was broadcast across Confederate space and to every human on Earth and throughout the solar system. President Ellen Foster and High Chancellor Veltor stood side by side in the station's Great Hall, a space hastily modified to accommodate both human and Zephyrin representatives. The treaty itself was a work of art, inscribed on quantum crystal that would last millennia. Today marks a new chapter in galactic history, President Foster said to the assembled dignitaries. Not a chapter of conquest or submission, but of mutual respect and coexistence. Veltor, towering over the human president, added his own words. The Confederacy has learned a valuable lesson. Strength comes not just from military might, but from recognizing the potential in all species. The treaty terms were unlike anything in Confederate history. Earth and the Sol system were recognized as sovereign territory. Humanity retained all its military capabilities, including the Nova bombs that had so shocked the Confederacy. Trade would be established, but on equal terms. Most importantly, a precedent had been set. Captain Julie Anderson, recently promoted to Commodore, commanded the USS Ambassador on its historic journey to the Zephyrin homeworld. It was the first human vessel to enter Confederate space openly and peacefully. Her crew of 300 included not just military personnel, but scientists, artists, and merchants. Commodore, her navigation officer reported, "We're approaching the Zephyrin homeworld." Julie looked at the view screen as the planet came into view. It was magnificent, covered in crystalline cities that reflected light in rainbow patterns. Orbital stations that dwarfed anything humanity had built floated serenely in space. "Send our greetings," she ordered. "Let them know we come in peace." The response was immediate and warm. USS Ambassador, you are welcome to Zephyra. High Chancellor, Veltor himself will receive you. As her ship docked at the orbital station, Julie reflected on how much had changed. 6 months ago, they had been prepared to die defending Earth. Now, she was making history as humanity's first ambassador to an alien world. The effect on the galaxy was even more profound than anyone had predicted. On the Kelvin homeworld, the resistance movement had evolved into a political party. They petitioned the Confederacy for autonomy, citing what they called the human precedent. The Confederate Council was divided, but High Chancellor Veltor saw an opportunity. Grant them partial autonomy, he advised. Let them govern themselves while remaining within the Confederacy. The cost of continued occupation outweighs the benefits. It was a radical shift in Confederate thinking, driven entirely by humanity's example. Within weeks, the Kelvin had their own government for the first time in 2 centuries. The Morteki were next. They negotiated a ceasefire that ended their underground resistance in exchange for greater freedoms. Other conquered species began similar negotiations. The iron grip of the Confederacy was loosening, replaced by something more flexible and, surprisingly, more profitable. General Sam Mitchell stood in the newly constructed Alliance Defense Headquarters on Mars. It was a joint facility where human and Zephyrin officers worked together, sharing knowledge and preparing for threats neither species had yet encountered. General Mitchell, a Zephyrin officer, approached. His name was Zactel, and he had been assigned as a liaison. The joint training exercise was successful. Your pilots adapted to our fighters faster than expected. Sam smiled. And your pilots learned our combat maneuvers quickly, too. Seems we have a lot to teach each other. The cultural exchange went beyond military matters. On Earth, Zephyrin students attended human universities, their three-eyed faces becoming a common sight in Cambridge, Tokyo, and Sao Paulo. Human students traveled to Confederate worlds, bringing back knowledge that advanced Earth's technology by decades. Dr. Lisa Chang published the first comprehensive study of Zephyrin biology, working directly with their scientists. The medical advances from comparing two completely different evolutionary paths were revolutionary. Diseases that had plagued both species for millennia suddenly had cures. But the most significant change came 3 years after first contact. A new threat emerged from beyond the galaxy's edge. The Voidlings, as they came to be known, were unlike anything the Confederacy had encountered. They consumed energy, breaking down matter at the quantum level. Entire star systems simply ceased to exist in their wake. Admiral Lisa Park, now Supreme Commander of Human Forces, sat in a joint strategy session with Confederate military leaders. "Our Nova bombs can hurt them," she reported, "but not stop them. We need something more." General Mordaunt of the Confederacy agreed. "Our weapons are also insufficient. Perhaps together." It was Captain John Carter who proposed the solution. Now an admiral himself, he commanded the combined Human-Confederate Task Force. What if we combine our technologies, human innovation, with Confederate power sources? The project took 6 months. Human and Zephyrin scientists worked side by side, along with Kelvin engineers and Mortecki theorists. The result was the quantum disruptor, a weapon that could destabilize the Voidlings at their fundamental level. The Battle of the Rim, as historians would later call it, saw the joint fleet engage the Voidlings at the galaxy's edge. 300 human ships fought alongside 500 Confederate vessels. The Kelvin contributed their own newly built fleet. The Mortecki provided tactical support. Admiral John Carter commanded from the USS Defiance, now refitted with hybrid, human Confederate technology. "All ships, implement pattern Omega. Let's show these things what a united galaxy can do." The battle was fierce. The Voidlings adapted to each attack, consuming energy from destroyed ships to grow stronger. But the United Fleet adapted too, using human creativity and Confederate discipline in perfect harmony. When the quantum disruptors fired in unison, space itself seemed to scream. The Voidlings, faced with a weapon that attacked their very existence, retreated beyond the galaxy's edge. They had been stopped, but more importantly, they had been stopped by species working together. President Ellen Foster, now in her second term, addressed the newly formed Galactic Council. It included not just the Confederacy and humanity, but representatives from all spacefaring species. "We faced annihilation separately," she said. "We achieved victory together. Let this be the foundation of a new age, where diversity is strength and cooperation is survival." High Chancellor Veltor, older now but wiser, added his support. "The Confederacy spent 1,000 years believing in domination. The humans taught us a better way, not through conquest, but through example." 5 years after first contact, the galaxy was unrecognizable. Trade routes connected hundreds of worlds. Technology flowed freely between species. The Confederacy still existed, but as a voluntary alliance rather than an empire. Earth had become a hub of innovation, its universities and research centers drawing students from across the galaxy. Young Danny Park, now 21, and following in his mother's footsteps at the Naval Academy, stood with his classmates watching a documentary about first contact. The screen showed that moment when humanity's fleet had revealed itself to Commander Zelnath. Hard to believe it was only 5 years ago, his Zephyrin classmate Miltok said. "My father was on that ship. He says it was the most terrifying and amazing moment of his life." Danny nodded. "My mom says the same. They thought it would end. in war. Instead, it ended in partnership. Commander Zelnath himself, now an ambassador rather than a military officer, often spoke at conferences about that crucial moment. The humans could have destroyed us, he would say. They had the weapons, the position, the element of surprise. Instead, they chose to talk. That choice changed everything. The ripple effects continued to spread. Young species that had been hiding revealed themselves, knowing they would be met with partnership offers rather than conquest fleets. Ancient species that had isolated themselves rejoined the galactic community. The galaxy became vibrant with exchange and growth rather than fear and subjugation. On the 10th anniversary of First Contact, a monument was unveiled on Earth's moon. It showed a human and Zephyrin hand-touching, surrounded by representatives of all known species. The inscription read, "They came as conquerors. We stood as defenders. We parted as friends. We continue as family." Admiral Lisa Park, retired now, stood with former High Chancellor Veltor at the ceremony. "Did you ever imagine it would turn out this way?" she asked. Veltor's 3 eyes crinkled and what she had learned was a smile. "Never. We expected to find primitive prey. Instead, we found teachers who taught us to be better than we were." Captain Beth Coleman, now Earth's senior diplomat, had the last word at the ceremony. 50 years of preparation gave us the strength to stand. But it was the choice to talk instead of fight that gave us the future. The galaxy shook when aliens discovered human warships ready for battle. It transformed when we chose peace instead. As ships from 100 worlds orbited Earth in celebration, the truth was clear. Humanity hadn't just defended itself. It had changed the fundamental nature of galactic civilization. The age of conquest was over. The age of cooperation had begun.